We would like to welcome everybody to our Boundaries and People Safety co-webinar. I'm Kimberly Perry, and my friend and colleague Pam Strickland will be presenting after me, and we would like to dive right in. I'm Kimberly Perry, and I've been married to my husband Randall Perry for 11 years. He is the love of my life, and we are the proud aunt and uncle of 3 nieces, 4 nephews, including triplets, and numerous second cousins. I have 15 years of experience teaching elementary age kids in the states of California, Michigan, and North Carolina with a Master's of Art in Teaching. I am a health educator teaching prevention and personal body safety tools. I'm not a counselor or a social worker. I taught preschool, 2nd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade classroom, as well as pre-K to 5th grade elementary health and PE. After teaching boundaries and personal body safety to over 1,000 kids, I was inspired to write the Say No and Tell books, and I founded We Stand Guard. So why do I do this? I want to empower all kids with boundaries, skills, and a voice during a questionable encounter so they know what to do. In the bottom left corner of this slide, you can see the picture of me with the triplets, my nephews, and a Say No and Tell book. And this makes me so grateful because I have too many friends and family members and society as a whole who have experienced child sexual abuse. My nephews and second cousins generation, they are the first in my family to be empowered with body boundaries and training, which can positively impact generations to come and help stop the abuse cycle. For example, my brother shared a story about the triplets. When one of them was around 6 years old, they were outside playing in the neighborhood. And another little boy his age decided to drop his pants and expose himself. My nephew's reaction was to run away and say, "Get away from me, you're showing me your private parts." So he went home and he told his parents. What if that child had been 10 years old, or a 16-year-old teenager, or a 40-year-old man? Regardless, my nephew knew what to do during a questionable encounter because he was trained at a young age with a Say No and Tell book. So my goal is prevention education. We must make personal safety, which is defined as prevention of child sexual abuse, on 2 different fronts, inside the home and outside the home, to protect all kids wherever they go. Like I said, in this webinar, personal safety is the prevention of child sexual abuse by teaching various forms of boundaries. As a health educator, we call this personal safety because it's a comprehensive term, including both physical contact and non-physical contact child sexual abuse, such as showing a child pornography. We teach kids skills such as fire safety, traffic safety, and water safety. I'm advocating that we also add body safety for kids. Overall, our society can be safer by teaching personal body safety for kids. Otherwise, everyone is left vulnerable, not knowing what to do, how to prevent, stop, or help heal from the harms of child sexual abuse. So let's define the problem. What is child sexual abuse? A sample definition for grown-ups is any contact or interaction, whether visual, verbal, or psychological, between a child minor and an adult, or between 2 minors, when a child minor is being used, when one exerts power over another with force, coercion, or persuasion for the sexual stimulation of the abuser or any other person. Here's a sample definition for children. Someone older or bigger tricks or makes a child have physical touch with either one's private parts, or non-touching interactions like seeing pictures of private parts or hearing uncomfortable words about private parts. We need to be armed with the facts. So I'm getting ready to share some facts with you, not to scare you, but for educational purposes. You may experience some discomfort as you learn the expansive reality of this sensitive and serious problem. Child sexual abuse, or CSM, is no respecter of persons, regardless of socioeconomic status, exposing all young people to risks and susceptibility due to our pornified culture. So let's all take a deep breath and let's think, I'm going to be brave for my kids as we learn about uncomfortable statistics, since it's not a matter of if, but when a child may have a questionable encounter. Statistics show that about 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday. About 2 out of every 10 girls and 1 out of every 10 boys will be sexually abused before their 14th birthday. The CDC estimates that approximately 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused before the age of 18. Also, you can visit the CDC to learn about adverse childhood experiences, otherwise known as ACEs, for the impact childhood traumas on child's increased risk for health problems and disease later in life. In fact, if you study prevention science at all, an important strategy to counter these ACEs is healthy family management by increasing protective factors, which include parental resilience, social connections, concrete support in times of need, knowledge of parenting and child development, and social and emotional competence of children. For example, building into a child's well-being or wellness with attention, connection, and quality time, plus decreasing risk factors such as neglect or loneliness from busyness or too much screen time. All of those things can help grow resilience. Here's some victim statistics. Only about 38% of child victims disclose the fact they've been sexually abused. Only 4 to 8% of child sexual abuse reports are fabricated. Nearly 70% of all reported sexual assaults occur to children ages 17 and under. About 35% of victims are 11 years old or younger. 20% of children who are sexually abused are abused before the age of 8, and about 44% of rapes occur to children under the age of 18. 90% of child sexual, these are abuser statistics now. 90% of child sexual abuse victims know their abuser. A lot of people think it's more stranger danger. 30% of children are abused by family members. As many as 60% are abused by people the family trusts. Nearly 40% are abused by older or larger children. About 81% of child sexual abuse for all ages happens in a one-on-one situation. 23% of 6 to 11-year-old children are most likely to be abused in multiple victim circumstances because those boundaries have been violated and there's a vulnerability there. Most sexual abuse of children happens in the residence of the victim or perpetrator. Let's talk about a solution. One solution I offer is the We Stand Guard training program, and it's comprised of 3 Say No and Tell books, but there's actually 2 sets. Set 1 offers a health education approach for general or secular audiences, and those all have purple titles. Set 2 offers the same approach with information for faith-based audiences, and those have blue titles. As a health educator, I know children. As a parent or a caregiver, you know your child. Therefore, the books are designed as toolkits with a flexible approach. You can decide what and when to share with your child. The content is recommended for K to 3rd grade or 5 to 9-year-olds. However, you can tailor this content for pre-K to 5th grade or toddlers to preteens. Here's a snapshot of my 3-phase approach for teaching boundaries and personal body safety. Phase 1, we want to teach body awareness, such as basic hygiene, health, and safety concepts. Phase 2, we explain boundaries with more unique safety concepts like internet, stranger danger, and people safety skills, which is what Pam is going to get into more so. And then phase 3, introduce personal body safety as a prevention skill. Overall, in phase 1, or wellness, this will lay the foundation for children to understand how to be healthy and safe. In this approach, we are building background knowledge which connects to the kids' real world. So you can begin with things like, your body is wonderful and needs proper care. As your body grows and changes, learning self-care is important. Curiosity about your body and private parts it's natural. It's part of developing body awareness. Teach that private parts are special parts with special rules. And you want to use real anatomical names for private parts earlier rather than later. Explain private parts using child-friendly language, such as private parts are covered by swimsuits. Some parts, like private parts, are not meant for sharing. Private parts stay private once you're not a baby anymore. Also, take care of your body by keeping it clean, healthy, and safe with the help of safe caregivers and trusted grown-ups when you're young. And those are 2 different lists that we're going to talk about, 2 different lists of people. Hygiene keeps you clean. You can tell children that hygiene has examples of needing assistance, such as cleaning a baby in the bath, helping a toddler with diapers, dressing and wiping after the potty for young children. There also may be healthy visits to a doctor, which may include medical touches from a doctor or nurse. A clinician may examine your body, sometimes checking private parts with parents in the room to keep you healthy or help you when you're sick. Tell kids that only safe caregivers may see, examine, or clean your private parts when appropriately needed for better health. Safety includes safe touches from trusted adults, safe caregivers, and others you know. Safe or good touches show that we care and love, like a hug versus an unsafe touch, like hitting. With a safe or a good touch, you feel safe, happy, and comfortable. Some other affections that are good: holding hands, handshakes, high fives, friendly tickles, playful wrestling, and piggyback rides. Some other unsafe touches are pushing, pinching, biting, grabbing, tugging, scratching, and so on. Empower the children with slogans which help remind them to take a stand against questionable encounters whenever possible. Give them permission to be in charge of their own bodies and have them practice with a firm voice, and you can role play these together. You can practice by saying, "My body belongs to me, and I decide who gives me safe touches." Some other guidelines include showing and sharing with kids that private parts need privacy and modesty, guarding your eyes and ears from hearing and seeing unsafe things about private parts, also noticing the uh-oh feeling or that funny tummy feeling, and say no to anyone trying an unsafe touch with private parts. It's okay to say no, thank you, or not right now, or safe, or even to safe or good touches. Phase 2, here's where we get into boundaries and the unique safety concepts, like learning about boundaries on the internet or with strangers or people safety. A boundary, so you think of a boundary like a fence is all around you, but there's a gate or a door for opening, for good things to come in and for bad or harmful things or people to stay out. Teach kids to guard your eyes and ears from what you see and hear. For grown-ups awareness, some examples of non-physical contact child sexual abuse include exhibitionism, exposure to pornography, voyeurism, or sexual communication via phone or internet. These examples can be grooming schemes of an abuser to try and normalize the next steps toward physical contact sexual abuse. So let's take a little side note and connect the dot of pornography. About 27% of older millennials say they started viewing pornography before puberty. So we need to start teaching about its dangers. We want to explain to kids that it's important to reject pornography so they can protect their brain and others from danger. Pornography has an addictive nature and it feels like you cannot stop even if you want to. And this can change the brain and harm the brain. It's not a matter of if, but when a child will most likely see pornography. And some experts say the average age is 8 or as young as 5. Really, it's, you think about it, whenever they have access to the internet. Also, pornography harms others. Pornography is sexual exploitation, since very often the acts are real abuse of women, including children, teens, and men, and other performers, because the industry preys on the vulnerable and eviscerates human dignity. Pornographic images of vulnerable men and women through coercion or exchange of sexual acts for goods and services is known as sex trafficking. Some call it child pornography rather than child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. CSAM accurately reflects this atrocity. Children and minors cannot give consent. And again, exposing or showing pornography to a child or minor is an example of non-physical contact child sexual abuse. Furthermore, one tactic an abuser may try is grooming. This is when an offender gradually draws a victim into a sexual relationship by showing pornography as normal, or they may give a child special attention, outings or gifts, isolate the child, fill the child's unmet needs or roles in the family, treat the child as older, cross physical boundaries, use secrecy, blame, and/or threats to maintain control. According to Patrick Croft, author of Serpents Among Us, the 5 predatory phases include trust, courtship, seduction, offending, and control. And so I want to say to you, as the grown-ups and caretakers, trust your gut. Trust when you see these signs and symptoms, because we can even go through the similar cognitive dissonance when it's like, is this really happening? Am I really seeing this? Identify and name safe people. Safe caregivers help with cleaning, physical care, and everyday living of a young child. This is a designated list, which may include mom, dad, step-parent, nanny, babysitter, doctor, and maybe another trusted family member like a grandparent. Whereas a trusted grown-up will help with general oversight and safety of children. This list would include teachers, principals, school personnel, coaches, police, firefighters, pastors, extended family members, safe neighbors, and family friends. Teach kids to understand this basic, simple principle. An unsafe person could be anyone, an older, bigger boy or girl, a teen, or a grown-up man or woman. Children need to understand that sometimes someone they know and love can become unsafe and untrustworthy by trying an unsafe touch. Reassure them that many people are very nice to kids, but sometimes a person may try to hurt or trick kids, and we need to be wise and know the difference. Okay, now we move into phase 3. Here's where we introduce personal body safety for kids after laying the foundation of wellness in phase 1 and boundaries in phase 2. Personal body safety fortifies safeguards for kids. Safeguards are safety measures taken to protect someone or something from harm or danger, or to prevent something undesirable from happening. Some synonyms for safeguards, when you might say to your child, I want to teach you some safeguards, but maybe they don't know what that means. So here's some other words: protection, defense, guard, preventative, precaution, provision, security, preserve, save, shield, and secure. Find words that the child understands. Phase 3 includes essentially 10 steps to unrolling and unveiling this pivot of teaching personal body safety. So step 1 is you review wellness, hygiene, health, and safety. Remember when we talked about wellness? Phase 2. Remember when we talked about safe versus unsafe touches? In phase 3, here's where we add the new concept to unsafe touches to private parts, and teach kids to recognize this questionable situation. Additionally, here are some other parts to phase 3. You're going to want to build a bridge for communication and have a warm and positive tone. The more familiar you get with this material and content, and that's why I love having the Say No and Tell books, because you can pre-read everything. The more knowledgeable you are and the more comfortable you are, you will transmit that and convey that we can talk about this topic, it's okay. You want to create a check-in rule when kids are away from you. Practice dialing 911. Develop a personal safety family plan. And oh, by the way, this is a free download at westandguard.com/newsletter. And bunches and bunches of people sign up for this because it is an immediate next action step you can take to begin educating yourself and helping your kids and your family and community become safer. 7, list safe caregivers and trusted grownups. Again, those are 2 different lists. 8, define safe versus unsafe people. You're going to want to memorize the 5 action steps for a questionable encounter, and then also learn some slogans. Please note that the 3-phase approach of the Say No and Tell books does not include reproduction, since it's not required to learn boundaries and personal body safety. As a reminder, these books are toolkits, so you can decide what and when to share with your child, including young children, while preserving the innocence of the early childhood years. So here's a jingle that you can rehearse and role play, but let's talk through the first, the 5 action steps. Like I said, since it's not a matter of if, but when a child may experience a questionable situation. Say no, get away if you can, tell someone, keep telling until it stops, take a stand. It is key to emphasize keep telling as many people as it takes until someone believes you and makes it stop. And then the jingle is, remember to say no, get away if you can, tell someone and keep telling until it stops, take a stand. For an overview, the 5 concepts of body boundaries are: 1, learning and understanding what is a safe or a good touch. 2, a safe or a good secret. For example, a birthday surprise is a safe secret because no one gets hurt. 3, safe and trusted people. 4, guarding your eyes and ears as well. And number 5, noticing the uh-oh feeling or that funny tummy feeling in your body. Trust your instincts. We want, as grown-ups throughout our ages, throughout life, I feel like we continue to learn to trust our gut while naming and expressing those emotions to someone safe. This is a vital life skill, and we need to exercise it like a muscle. All right, let's recap the 5 concepts of saying no. And this can be for grown-ups as well. Saying no is a boundary or a limit. Number 2, your job is to tell a trusted grown-up right away. 3, telling is not tattling. 4, if this is happening to a friend, then tell. And 5, it is never your fault. Lastly, I did research the tactics of an abuser, and I discovered 8 tricks, and I turned them into 8 positive life skills, because we want to teach young people what to do, not just what to stay away from or what to recognize in terms of signs and symptoms. It's building in those protective factors. So we want to teach them about privacy, which is when they're changing clothes. Private moments like bathing, guarding your eyes from things like pornography, guarding your ears from uncomfortable words about private parts. Gifts versus bribes. For instance, gifts are free. Safe secrets. No one is hurt like a surprise birthday. Self-care, like wellness or well-being comes first. And safe games, like don't give any personal info over the internet. So in the Butterfly Maisie book and the Daxton Dolphin book, they're the Say No and Tell children's books, there is a scenario section where you actually role play these. And there's a safe scenario and an unsafe, and you can just walk through these one by one. And the role playing helps to override the amygdala when you're in a questionable situation where you're exercising and memorizing these things so they can pop into your mind, and you can be in your frontal lobe and begin problem solving whenever possible. And think about teachable moments as you've gone through these scenarios and revisit them throughout the children's life. So one time my friend brought over her 2 little girls to our community pool, and the bathroom light was broken. And so the girls didn't want to go in. It was like too dark, didn't want to go in there. And so they wanted to get out of their wet clothes. So we took this teachable moment and said, okay, this is a private moment and we need privacy. So we're going to hold up a towel around you while you change out of your bathing suit. And then the younger one, we had to change her diaper and everything. And we did the same thing for her, where we said the same thing and we held the towel up around them. And they, in that moment, within 3 to 5 minutes, had a say no and tell teachable moment. Okay, well, now what? Again, you can get your free gift. Download your personal safety family plan by signing up for my newsletter at westandguard.com/newsletter. And I'll also put these links in the chat. Please visit westandguard.com, the website. You can order the Say No and Tell books from my website, which are on Amazon. And I do provide discounts on bulk orders of 10 or more. So please email me for bulk order price discounts. Also, I want to encourage you to continue your training by reading a Say No and Tell book with a child or give it away as a gift. My mother-in-law, she buys these books and puts them in baby shower gift baskets. And just to review the children's books, Daxton Dolphin and Maisie Butterfly, they have the same content, but it's just with a different main character to provide different animal science for an added interest for kids. And they're read alouds for K to 3. However, you can customize content for pre-K through 5th grade. And they're toolkits with 3 sections. There's a story section, a scenario section, and a solution section. Also, you can schedule me to teach a 75-minute online workshop. It's very simple. You just think of a group of friends or colleagues, and you can form your own group, and we pick a day and a time. And there's a lot more interaction and personalization and customization with the training. Whereas the webinars are more of a big picture overview. And also there's a training workbook for parents or caregivers or professionals working with kids. And this goes into great detail of the 3-phase approach. So when you consider your next step, one question you can ask yourself is, what is the pathway of least regret for me, for my child, my family, and my community? What will help your family feel safe rather than sorry? And please, let's stay connected on social media. And I love to interact with you all and push out what I'm doing, and then we can share and cross promote. And Pam and I have talked about how the vision we feel today is for us to unite and just keep sharing this information. And lastly, here is a picture of a mom. Her name is Brittany. And she's actually doing what, as a teacher, we call a picture walk through the book, because Selah, you can see, is very young. And a picture walk simply means you walk through the story part and you just talk about each of the pictures, because she's pre-read the book. And that's an example of any and all ages. So Brittany says, of all the things I'm responsible for teaching Selah, body autonomy is near the top of my list. Perhaps more than ever, our generation understands how critical it is for kids and adults to be able to say no and protect their bodies. I have my own #me story too. And while I can't keep Selah safe every minute of every day, I'm doing what I can to make sure she's equipped with the tools she needs to protect and stand up for herself. And now I would like to pass the baton to Pam. And again, please put your questions in the Q&A.
Thank you, Kimberly. That was so interesting and so informative. I'm really glad that we're able to do this together. I am going to share my screen now. And so first, I'm going to introduce you a little bit to our nonprofit, just like Kimberly did. So our nonprofit started in 2010. And our vision is a state free of human trafficking. Our mission is creating communities actively working to abolish human trafficking. So, what does human trafficking look like in North Carolina? As of 2021, which is the last year that we have data, North Carolina is ranked in the top 15 of states in the nation for human trafficking reports. You'll see that there were 223 confirmed cases of human trafficking involving 340 victims. So there were cases that had multiple victims. Now, to be clear, these are only cases that came in through the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So it's accurate for what it is, but what it does not include are the cases that were reported to local law enforcement, to the SBI, to the FBI, to ICE, to DSS, to domestic violence shelters and sexual assault shelters, to human trafficking agencies. So this is not really an indication of prevalence in the state. It's an indication of how many cases were reported to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The actual number of cases is much greater. I thought y'all might be interested in seeing sort of a breakdown of, and again, this is from the hotline information, of what those victims look like. And so you see here the gender, the vast majority are female. You see in terms of the age that most of the reported victims through the hotline are adults, but there is a significant minority of minors, close to a third are minors. And then there's not enough, there wasn't enough data reported really to determine nationality and citizenship there. So I thought we would just look at a couple of cases just to give you some examples of what human trafficking of minors looks like in the state. So this is a case that happened several years ago where a high school track coach was accused of trafficking a 14-year-old student. We had a case here in Pitt County, where I live, that involved a young person who was forced to pass counterfeit money. And, thank goodness that she was forced to do that, because that's how she got rescued. Law enforcement was called because counterfeit money was being passed at a local Dollar General. And when the law enforcement agent arrived, the teenage girl was there. He certainly could have just taken her, down to the station or to juvenile hall right then, but something didn't feel right to him. Kimberly was just talking about trusting your gut. And I always tell people the same thing, Kimberly. If something doesn't feel right, it's not right. Trust your gut. And so he kept asking questions. And when he asked her where she lived, she said she lived in the hotel across the street. So that's a pretty big red flag. Turns out the girl was a runaway from New York. And this fellow, Mr. Spencer, had said he would help her. And how he helped her was by trafficking her from New York down to North Carolina. And so one of the things that we know is that runaways are incredibly, incredibly vulnerable. And, there are so many different things that we as adults, can do and should do to protect our kids. But reducing their feeling of the need to run away, or some of these kids just don't feel like home was a safe place, right? And that's the part, part of what Kimberly's been talking about. And if home isn't a safe place, then having these other trusted adults that they can go to for help is just imperative, so that they don't run away without a plan. They need to have a plan if home is not a safe place. So sometimes we throw around this phrase of human trafficking or sex trafficking without really defining it. So I want us to take a look at the definition from the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. This was passed in 2000. It was the first time we had a federal statute that defined human trafficking, that provided consequences for the perpetrators, and also provided funds to provide services for victims. So the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person performing the act is under age 18. Now, a lot of verbs there at the beginning, and the reason for that is that the Congress wanted to be sure that any person who participated in the trafficking of someone could be held accountable, could be arrested with the charge of sex trafficking. So whether that person was doing the recruiting, or is working at the hotel desk, or is the landlord, or is providing, is the taxi driver from date, in parentheses, date to date, anyone that's involved with the trafficking could be charged. So the important thing that makes the sex trafficking definition different from labor trafficking is that age makes a difference. So if a person is over 18 years old, then they must prove that force, fraud, or coercion was involved. However, if the person is under 18, is a minor, and being used for a commercial sex act, then you don't have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. The mere fact that the child is a minor being used for commercial sex makes them a victim of sex trafficking. So here are some places where you might find victims of sex trafficking. You'll see here at the end, I've got internet in red. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. I mean, we do entire sessions on, how the internet has impacted the issue of human trafficking, especially sex trafficking. As you look at these, some of these may seem obvious, and some of them maybe not so much, but you'll notice that a lot of these are places where groups of people meet, convention centers and sporting events, so that when people are transient, when people are passing through a community, many times is when they will take advantage of the services of a sex trafficking victim. You see on here, escort services. There was a huge case just recently, some of you may have heard about, in Wilmington, where an escort service was busted for actually being a sex trafficking operation, and 150 victims have been identified from that one case. So also on that list was hotels. We had a really sad case here in Pitt County a couple of years ago where a 16-year-old girl had died in a hotel from a drug overdose. And when that case was being investigated, it was discovered that she had actually been a trafficking victim. And the guy with her, Anthony Cox, had been trafficking her and had been providing the drugs to her. It also, as the investigation went on, so the girl had just turned 16 in December, the month that she died, and she already had a 2-year-old child. So this child had been being sexually abused from the time she was 12 or 13. You will see here that the trafficker was charged with multiple felonies. And as far as I know, he has not yet gone to court. So when we talk about the issue of domestic minor sex trafficking, people are surprised sometimes to learn that the average age at which a child is first manipulated into prostitution is between the ages of 11 and 14. I would ask you to help me with a matter of language here. You will sometimes hear these children referred to as child prostitutes or child sex workers. And I am just going to ask you to please understand that there's no such thing as a child prostitute or a child sex worker. These are abused children. They're victims of sex trafficking. And if you hear other people use those phrases, if you would please just respectfully correct them. So we want to look now at what makes a child vulnerable to being exploited or trafficked. So children who are at risk for recruitment are those who sometimes feel insecure, feel misunderstood, fight with their parents, sometimes feel their parents don't care, want more independence, test boundaries and take risks, are under 18, walk to the store or school alone, own or have access to a computer, are attracted to consumer goods like food, electronics, jewelry, clothing, and desire to develop romantic relationships. So what does that tell us? All children are at risk for recruitment into commercial sexual exploitation. However, we do know that some characteristics make a child more vulnerable than others. And so we are going to talk about some of those. Sadly, we know that being in foster care or being involved with child protective services is a huge risk factor. And, that's really sad, right? Because we take children out of what we think is an unsafe environment, put them in foster care to keep them safe, and then find out that it's not necessarily true. And part of the reason is that the traffickers know these kids in foster care are vulnerable. They know they're looking for friends and family and security. And so they recruit specifically kids in foster care and even kids from group homes. Here's an example of that. Some of y'all might have heard about this a couple of years ago. This was during the height of the pandemic. A child from a group home, as you'll see here at the second bullet, from a children's home in Lexington, had been in contact with this 36-year-old man on her school-issued laptop, that she got because of the pandemic. So she'd been communicating with him and apparently gave him her location. He came and picked her up and kidnapped her. Now, she went willingly, but it's still considered kidnapping because she's a minor. You see, he also had all kinds of drugs with him. Thank goodness the child was safely recovered. But here's an example of a predator recruiting and grooming a child online, and they tell them where they are and off they go. Thank goodness this child was recovered safely. Other vulnerabilities include, I already mentioned, runaways, which of course is closely related to homelessness in youth. The LGBTQ community is very vulnerable and is overrepresented in the population of children who are exploited sexually. We know that the LGBTQ community in general faces discrimination, and oftentimes they're, kicked out of their homes. They have little social support, little family support, and that makes them really vulnerable. Some other things that increase a child's vulnerability are isolation, mental health issues, unaddressed trauma, like the issue of child sexual abuse that Kimberly spoke about, developmental disabilities, emotional distress, a dysfunctional family, sexual abuse, neglect, the parent's use of a child for a paycheck, drug or alcohol use by a child, lack of social support, poverty, aging out of foster care. So being a foster child in itself makes you vulnerable, but then once you age out, you don't have any support. So people, predators will recognize that as well and offer you support that you don't realize is for a really big price. Familial or peer promotion of sexual exploitation. There are many situations where the exchange of sex for something is generational, is normalized in particular families or particular communities, that you exchange sex for rent, you exchange sex for a pizza, you exchange sex for cigarettes or for drugs. And so obviously if you are born into a family or a community like that, then your chances of being sexually exploited increase tremendously. And gang involvement is also a risk factor. What we know from talking to survivors of sex trafficking is that typically it's not one of these risk factors that I've mentioned, but usually a combination of several of them that results in a child becoming a victim of CSEC or commercial sexually exploited child. So I told you we were going to talk a little bit about the internet. So internet crimes against children, something that has just exploded in the last few years. The numbers that we're looking at here are the number of tips received by the North Carolina Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And you see that in 2019, which was the year before COVID hit, there were less than 5,000 tips. 2020, the first year of COVID, that almost doubles to over 9,000. The next year, it jumps again dramatically. And then for last year, another huge jump. Now, these tips are coming from the cyber tip line that is managed by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And so the general public, of course, can make tips to that hotline. But the majority of the tips that go into that hotline are actually coming from places like Facebook and Twitter and other online services. Here are some signs or red flags that a child might be being groomed by someone online. They become obsessive about being online. They're secretive about their online activities. They close the computer as soon as you walk in, receiving calls from people you don't know, or making calls to numbers you don't recognize, receiving gifts or packages from someone you don't know, a withdrawal from family or friends, or they begin downloading or consuming pornography that's usually suggested by the predator. So here's another case that happened here in North Carolina a couple of years ago, again on a school-issued computer. This teenage girl was in contact with this adult male, and he took her from the home, and she was found in another state. You can see here he was also talking to other girls in Alamance County. The girl was safely recovered. And when I say safely, I'm talking about physically, she was okay. These girls will never recover from these traumatic experiences. So who actually traffics children? We don't want to believe this, but very often the very people who are supposed to be protecting our children are the ones who are trafficking them. So parents and other family members are often the perpetrators. Familial trafficking is the second leading recruitment mechanism in sex trafficking. And a quote from a familial sex trafficking survivor: "It's an absolute betrayal that a relative is so evil to sell you for profit. Most relatives are selling girls for their drug habit. Some sell them because of poverty, and others sell them because they think it's cool to have someone like you to pass around to their friends for cash." 81% of familial traffickers accept drugs as payment for the sale of their children for sex. When trauma emanates from within the family, children experience a crisis of loyalty and organize their behavior to survive within their families. This is a great book, The Body Keeps the Score, about trauma. So here are some other red flags you can be on the lookout. Tattoos, I think I already mentioned gang affiliation. Here is a case that happened in Wilmington a few years ago where they send this young, good-looking guy into the high schools to recruit girls into the gang to then be used in trafficking. Some things you can ask if you are wondering if a minor that you are interacting with might possibly be a victim. Do they suddenly have a lot more material possessions that would have been given to them by a trafficker trying to groom them? Jewelry, designer bags, a new manicure that they can't afford, that kind of stuff. They're traveling frequently to other cities. That's a change that their family probably does not have the means to do that. Do they have a lot of hotel key cards? Do they have a much older boyfriend? So we had a case of that a couple of years ago in Wilson County, where this older man, 35-year-old man, befriends a 13-year-old girl, convinces her they're boyfriend and girlfriend, introduces her to his drug dealing friends. They get her addicted to drugs, and then they take her around to labor camps, migrant labor camps, where the farm workers there line up to rape this child. So it's been hard. I know the things that I've just shared with you, and hopefully it's given you some things to think about. One thing I do want you to be aware of is that if you do see anything that you think that a child is in danger, that might be being trafficked, please call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The hotline goes to DC, but they've got a list of people here in North Carolina that can help. And just to let you know, if you do suspect that a minor is being exploited in any way, not only sexually and not only trafficked, that we are all mandatory reporters here in North Carolina. So you need to report both to DSS and to law enforcement. And here's our contact information if you would like to contact me further with questions. Thank you, Kimberly.
All right. Well, we want to thank everybody for coming and being brave to learn about this very sensitive and tough topics and information. And the more we learn about this and educate ourselves, the more we can grow the prevention education side and strengthen the intervention and the recovery, and become full circle where we begin to see statistics going down. And my belief is to stop it altogether. And so we just want to thank everyone for being here. And I'm wondering, Pam, do we want to stop the recording and then do the Q&A for some privacy and confidentiality